In this video, we're going to look at the statistics surrounding the situation we are in on March 5th of 2024. Bitcoin has eclipsed the prior high, all-time high. We had this big bear market in between, but we had this high back here in late 2021, right around 69,000. And then on March 5th, we eclipsed it, hitting, you can see the numbers up here, the high, 69,218. This will vary a little bit by exchange, but looking at several different exchanges, they were all between 69,200, 69,300. So on all those exchanges, the all-time high was eclipsed, and then it was promptly followed by this very swift drop of approximately 15%. Again, very slightly by exchange. But the question now people are asking is, has that level been rejected and now we're heading back into another bear market, or do we continue higher from here? Well, we don't know what's going to happen this time, but we can look at history and see that this type of volatility and this type of rejection initially is extremely common. So let's go back quite a ways and let's just go through all of them. So we had this high back here, 2014, then we entered this big bear market and we came back. It wasn't until 2017, let's zoom in here, 2017, and we have this where it got very close, within about 4% of that high, 3%-ish, so very close, and then had this big rejection. And this one was quite large, about 35%. So just sells off like crazy and then bounces right back. And then we can see the same thing happen again. It just gets whipsawed at that high, some big moves, like within a couple days here, moving 25-30%. And then we ultimately get another decline off that high of about 32%. But ultimately the price continues higher. But this took several months for this all to kind of play out. Once it got close to that level, before it really got going again, it was several months. So now we're looking at the scenario that's happening in 2024. In 2024, as you recall, we had that big bear market. So the price had moved away from the all-time high for quite some time and then came back to it. So this is just an overall bull market. But even if you looked at some of these highs in here, you can see the price moved up to this level, got rejected off of it quite significantly, about 20%. Same thing here, it moves up, peaks, big drop off. So even at some of these high points, after we've moved away from them, once the price gets back there, it's often quite a volatile period. But anyway, we had this big run up into the 2017 high, which brought us into, I believe the high was 19,660. Again, might vary slightly by exchange, but that 9,600 area. And then we have this big drop. So this is very similar to 2024. And then we don't really get close to it until 2020. And look at this. Once again, we get the same scenario. We get to it, and then we get smacked off by about 17%. Move back up. You can see it happens here again on this big bar here. And then even after that, it continues going up a little bit. We fall about 11-12% before we ultimately continue rallying. So we have this little 2-month or so period where the price is just getting really whipped around that all-time high. This one took a little bit longer than a couple months. We find the same thing in 2021. This is the scenario everyone doesn't want to happen, where we had the decline, we move back up, and we get whipsawed around. You can see this one about just exceeds the high, then drops 18%, makes a new high again, and then we enter a bear market. this decline, this to me looks not quite the same as our 2024 scenario. We came back here pretty quick, a little bit smaller decline in here, only about a 50% decline. We had a really significant bear market here. Took much longer to develop, was much deeper. We dropped about 80% off that prior high, 77%, and now we're coming back. So this to me looks a little bit more similar to these other cases that we looked at where the price did ultimately continue higher, but there's no way that we can know that. But we do, every time the price has experienced this kind of volatility. So if you can accept that and say expect a range in here of about even up to about 30%, which would take the price down to there. You know, this is the type of volatility which is typical around a high. And if you can accept that, then maybe you might be able to pick up some advantageous prices on these pullbacks. And again, they don't always go 30%. Sometimes they're only 18, like what we've already seen, 15 to 18, which would be more in this kind of area here. And we usually get a couple of them. So you might be able to pick up some lower prices on these pullbacks if you expect the uptrend to continue. At least for the moment, this is still an uptrend, even though we've experienced some volatility here. Really anything less than 20% is pretty much a hiccup in Bitcoin, so it's not a huge deal to me. I'm still viewing this as an overall uptrend. We have seen lots of whipsaw periods that have ended up continuing higher. So once this starts, you know, if it does, we get some whipsaws and then we start making lower lows and lower highs, that's more when I'll start to consider the downtrend. But for right now, I'm still looking at this as an uptrend, and this volatility actually presenting some opportunities to get rid of some of the Bitcoin if we've owned it for this uptrend, maybe get some out and then buy some in kind of at the lower end of the volatility range in anticipation of the next move up, which could come, you know, like we looked at a few other examples. Usually takes about a month or two for it to kind of work through that volatility and end up pushing higher if it's going to, or end up pushing lower if it does ultimately get rejected. So that's how history has shown that Bitcoin typically acts around its prior all-time highs.